So Charles Ng gets out around October of 1983 at Leavenworth Prison after serving 18 months, and they're back constructing prison cells on their ranch and abducting their neighbors and people that they knew. On June 2nd, 1985, Lake and Ng are caught trying to steal a bench vise at a hardware store. So I guess Ng runs out and he throws it into the car, and then he runs off. And meanwhile, Lake tries to manipulate the owner of the store, who was in the process of calling the cops. And Lake said, my friend thought I was going to pay for that, so let me just pay for it and we'll just forget the whole thing. The guy wasn't going for it, and he called the cops anyway. And so when the cops showed up, Lake tried to manipulate the cops, but the cop was already going to the car, and they found a gun in the car with a silencer on it. And that's a charge in California, and so they arrested Lake. My guess is that they were maybe used to getting away with anything they wanted to get away with. They were driving around in a stolen car. They had switched license plates around. The gun was stolen, and these were all stolen from their murder victims. Lake had a murder victim's ID that he was passing off as himself. And so they were just used to manipulating or stealing from anyone they wanted to, I guess, because they were in the Special People's Club. And that's witchcraft. A lot of people get intimidated around these people, and they don't want to start any problems with them whatsoever. A lot of people they're afraid, and they just start minding their own business or doing something else, and that's how they get away with so much, because these people are plants, and they're implanted by some very evil entities. So Lake and Ng were probably planted with Drax and Bafath. So maybe the agency thought it was time for them to pull their hero card and bring these killers to justice. They were getting sloppy, maybe. It seems he had money to pay for that vice. I know that a lot of these guys aren't too well funded, as in they're not given too much money or allowed to have too much money. And if they were kind of shut-ins at that ranch, I don't know if they were distributing the snuff films that they were creating, because they were videotaping. They stole video equipment from one of their victims, and they're recording some of this. You could find a tape on the internet. It was the police, after they arrested these two, they started going through the whole area. And the quote from the cops is that they found a soft spot in the front yard. And they dug into the soft spot, and they found a barrel. And in the barrel was a couple videotapes, Leonard Lake's ID, Leonard Lake's checkbook, and a couple of his murder victims' IDs. So if it was a soft spot in the ground, that implies that it had been recently dug in there, most likely. And I don't know if it was planted there by the cult, by someone like Claralyn, and basically it kind of framed Leonard Lake as involved with abducting women and videotaping them. However, the stuff that I could see on the internet here, the two girls depicted on the film, they seem more sedated and not too fearful about being handcuffed and their clothes cut off. Lake is kind of speaking calmly to them, and she's like, why are you doing this? And he's like, because I don't like you. And meanwhile, Ng is like cutting her clothes off. So they don't seem outwardly threatening, but they are being dominant and saying, you're going to do what we want you to do. But the girls seem like it's some sort of like S&M game. And they might have been selected due to the fact that they were promiscuous or known to be promiscuous. Both the girls on those videotapes were lured there. One girl was the girlfriend of, I don't know if it was Lake or Ng's friend that they met in jail. I think it was one of their cellmates. And maybe the cellmate said that, I know this girl who's promiscuous. So they lured her there by saying her boyfriend wanted to meet up with her, and they were to take her to meet him. And they got her at that ranch that way. She just left her job, got in the car with Lake, and Lake drove her over there. And the other girl with the young child was a neighbor whose husband was probably killed. And then like a day later, they applied similar tactics by going to her house and saying that her husband was at their ranch and wanted she come over and have a couple of beers with them or something. And so when she got there, they might have drugged her. They might have offered her some alcohol or some drugs. Maybe they spiked her drink. Meanwhile, per the CIA, the house is rigged with electromagnetic energy oscillators. And that's enough to put most people, into a sedated state. And they begin to act like they're playing around, and they get the handcuffs on her because in the video she doesn't seem threatened. And so in the plant community, they'll utilize girls who are naive, promiscuous, drug addicts, alcoholics, and of course they're planted and they're easier to manipulate. And I'll have to go into more detail later. They'll be planted with like a third-class gray, and the gray would be coaching their host into doing what someone like Leonard Lake or Charles Ng wanted them to do. Instilling thoughts or motivating them to do what these killers wanted to. And that's witchcraft, and I'll talk more about that a little bit later. So these ladies, if they begin to resist the programming and freak out, they're murdered. And if they go along with it and become willing mind control victims, they could be traded or sold, given a new identity, and they disappear into the cult, possibly to become someone like Claralyn later. And essentially they get planted with something that will go on to manipulate others in the same fashion. And they find it's better to be a manipulator than a victim. Now, at the hardware store incident, they were both approached. Charles Ng takes off on foot, and he runs back to Claralyn, and he says to Claralyn that, Lake's over there messing with the cops, so let's go by and take a look. So they go back there and they see that Lake's been arrested, or he's in the process of being arrested, and later Claralyn drives Ng to a bus stop, and Ng disappears up into Canada. So meanwhile, Lake was brought to the police station, and they say he carries a cyanide pill capsule wherever he goes. And I just consider that highly doubtable. I really doubt that. I'm sure he talked about cyanide before, carrying cyanide around and eating it so you won't be questioned. That's very military. That's very spy-like. And I'm sure he talked about that. But just the idea of wherever you go, to carry around a cyanide pill, it just seems doubtable. And they say he would hide it underneath his collar or something like that. I just don't believe that. And the story is that he asked for a drink of water and a piece of paper and a pencil. He was given the water and a piece of paper and a pencil, and moments later he was convulsing on the floor, and they brought him to the hospital. He was in the coma for a few days, and then he eventually died. My guess is that the cult killed him, quite possibly with whatever was in that drink they gave him. That seems more probable to me. So Lake was either killed, or they wanted to get him out of that situation, and it's very easy for the cult to get him out of the local cop station to a hospital, pronounce him dead, and then he wakes up and he's given a new identity. So it's anyone's guess if Leonard Lake woke up as a priest in Peru and began a pen pal relationship with his buddy Jim Jones, who perishes in Argentina, or not.